lecture is on Richard Wagner's Die Walku. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Richard Wagner and also about Die Walku. You may think just by hearing that composer and name that you will not recognize this piece, but take a moment to listen to it before continuing because you will surely recognize it. This is the piece that goes dun 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 dun. Okay, you probably heard it from cartoons. It's often called affectionately the Kill the Wabbit piece, thanks to Elmer Fudd. Okay, so take a listen to it. This piece is what this video lecture is about. So a little bit about Richard Wagner. First of all, his name, if you look at it and you would pronounce it in English, it'd be Richard Wagner. Okay, but it's not Richard Wagner. Nobody says that. They pronounce it the way the Germans would, which is Richard Wagner. The W sounds like a V in German. So if you say Richard Wagner, it's a dead giveaway that you don't know anything about him. We all say Richard Wagner. Okay, so just make sure you pronounce it if you ever say it out loud. He was a German composer. He was from the Romantic era, born in 1813, died in 1883, so pretty squarely in the Romantic era. His music is very much of the Romantic spirit, everything that we've talked about in terms of the expressiveness, the expansiveness, the size of the orchestra, the length of the pieces, all of that we've talked about is absolutely applicable to his music. He's particularly known for his opera compositions. That's what has made him most famous. He's written several great operas. And of course, we know that an opera is this large-scale composition with singers, orchestra, sets, costumes, choreography, a libretto, which we know is the script that goes along with the opera. That's what he's famous for. There's an aspect of Wagner that your textbook does not mention. I think it deliberately does not mention it because it's kind of a controversial side to Wagner, but I'm going to mention it because I think it's an important thing to know about Wagner. It actually has relevancy in today's life, as you will see. Okay, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about some good aspects of Wagner, the person, and then some very bad aspects. Good aspects about Wagner is first that he wrote amazing music. His music is incredible. Think about how you know this piece we're going to listen to. You've heard it. It's stood the test of time. His music is incredible to listen to. It was very revolutionary, monumental in its time. Okay, so that's one good aspect of Wagner. Another good aspect is, again, about his music, that it was very groundbreaking. He put a lot of the traditions of opera and kind of turn them on their head. For example, we know that operas have arias and recitatives. Okay, we looked at those differences between those. Arias are the songs in an opera. Recitative is that sung speech that's quasi singing, but also quasi just furthering the dialogue along. He took the idea of aria recitative and just kind of got rid of it. And so he smoothed out the difference between the songs and the not songs in opera. He also was big on combining all of the various elements of the opera, the sets, the costumes, the music, the dance, having it all relate in more cohesive ways. There's a long German word for that your textbook does mention, Gesamtkunstwerk, which means total art music. It means all the different elements relate. I'm not going to get into that in detail, but just know that it's something that he did that really changed opera and music. You can look at music as before Wagner and after Wagner because of some monumental changes that he made. So that's some really good in terms of Wagner, right? There's some really good aspects to who he was. But here's a really bad side to Wagner. He was highly anti-Semitic, which means he was highly anti-Jew. Now, this was not just with Wagner at the time. In the 19th century, anti-Semitism was rampant, very much popular. This idea that Jewish people aren't even real people. They're not fully human. They're of an inferior race. They are a problem in society. They're a menace to society. Wagner not only believed this, which is what a lot of people believed at the time, but he wrote about it. I mean, he was very vocal and active in the anti-Semitic world. So this is a really horrible side to Wagner, of course. And then if we fast forward to the 20th century, where we get into World War II and the rise of Adolf Hitler, Hitler found Wagner to be a kindred spirit to him. Hitler listened to Wagner's music, he read Wagner's writings, and very much felt akin to Wagner and his beliefs. So Wagner's music is associated with Nazism, okay, as well as anti-Semitism. very bad side to Wagner. And it's this question we have to deal with when we think about Wagner is, do we love the guy because he wrote amazing music? Or do we hate him because of his horrible beliefs? Let me tell you two ways that this is relevant in today. First of all, you've all heard of the wedding march, right? The processional in weddings, the da-dum-da-da, That was written by Wagner. Okay, that was in an opera by Wagner where there's a wedding and that music takes place. People have extracted it from the opera and now you hear it in weddings. If you are a Jewish person, you're not going to have that in your wedding. And it's a decision that both Jews and non-Jews have to make when they are getting married. Are they going to have the music of Wagner, this anti-Semitic person, in their ceremony? I know as a musician, I have played in people's weddings before. If I know it's a Jewish person, I'm definitely not going to suggest that I play the wedding march. I'm going to play something else as the processional. So it's absolutely relevant to today because weddings happen all the time. I think it's an important thing to know, and people who do know that history are very conscious of making that decision. Another thing is that this idea of whether you love the music or you love the person or you hate the person is also relevant when we think about companies today. Sometimes companies support things that we don't like, and the question is, do we give that company our business because the company has a good product, or do we boycott that company because the company stands for something that we don't believe in? Most recently was the Chick-fil-A controversy. Chick-fil-A was reported to be giving money to groups that have been deemed hate groups by the Southern Poverty Law Center. So, do you boycott Chick-fil-A because they're giving money to hate groups? Or do you go to Chick-fil-A because you want waffle fries and chicken sandwich and sweet tea? That's a choice that you each individually have to make for yourself. I'm not going to give you an opinion on what to do in that case. We will look at the music of Wagner, purely the music of Wagner, and I just wanted to let you know about that important background in his life and how it is incredibly relevant today. Okay, now about Die Walku and the Ride of the Valkyries, this Kill the Wabbit. Die Walku is an opera. Again, we have a word that starts with a W, so it's pronounced like a V, Die Walku. This is an opera, and I've talked to you about how the pieces in Romantic era tended to get longer. This is kind of the quintessential example because this opera is 5 hours long. Right? It has 2 intermissions. It usually takes actually about 7 hours because of the intermissions in between to give people a break. Sometimes people even stop and have dinner in between acts of this opera. You might think that that's the most horrible thing you've ever heard, to have an opera that's 5 hours long. But remember, this music is incredible. And I've watched Die Walku. It was the best 5 hours probably I've ever spent. If you know what you're getting yourself into, you're in for 5 hours of pretty awesome music. So keep that in mind. But it is 5 hours long. Not only is it 5 hours long, but it's actually one opera in a set of 4 operas, each which are 3 to 5 hours long, okay, in length. Of course, they take longer with the intermissions. You would never hear all the operas back to back. It's too much for the audience, too hard on the musicians, and too complicated a production. So if you're going to hear the entire set, you're going to hear them over different nights. But this is the second in this set that's called the Ring Cycle. So the Ring Cycle is the 4 operas, and then Die Walku is one of the operas, the second opera in the set. The material for the Ring Cycle comes from ancient Norse mythology, Norse meaning Northern Europe, kind of present-day Norway, Scandinavia region. This comes from ancient Norse mythology, and what's interesting is that J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, which is probably something a lot of you are familiar with, that material also comes from ancient Norse mythology. So there are incredible similarities in the plot and subject matter of Wagner's Ring Cycle and The Lord of the Rings. You can even tell in the title, the ring, right? So in the Ring Cycle, there is a ring that has incredible power. Same with Lord of the Rings. And people have actually asked J.R.R. Tolkien, they're like, did you take inspiration from Wagner's Ring Cycle? And he says, no, we're both taking from the same ancient mythology. Okay, so just so if you look at the plot for the entire Ring Cycle, those of you who know Lord of the Rings will be shocked at how similar the 2 plots are. Okay, so we're going to look at the second opera, which is called Die Walku. In English, that's The Valkyrie. Plots in operas are very complicated. I'll give you a brief summary of what goes on and what's happening in this piece of music. So we meet in this opera 2 twins named Siegmund and Sieglinde. Okay, Siegmund and Sieglinde are twins, but they fall in love. So we have some incestuous twins in this opera. Now, Siegmund is a god, or I think he's a demigod, half god. His father is Wotan, who is king of the gods. Wotan is another word that starts with a W, but is pronounced like a V. It's W-O-T-A-N. Wotan realizes that these twins are in love, and he feels that he has to kill Siegmund because of this, okay? So Wotan decides he's going to kill his own son. Meanwhile, another child of Wotan named Brunhilde wants to prevent this. She doesn't want Siegmund to die. It's her half-sibling. So Brunhilde tries to save Siegmund. She is unsuccessful, and in the end of the opera, she suffers a curse where she will become mortal. So she's going to lose all of her divine powers. Brunhilde is a Valkyrie, and a Valkyrie is a female warrior, okay, in the story. And Brunhilde, if you've ever seen a picture of an opera and you see this large woman with armor and braids, some of you may maybe seen a picture, that's Brunhilde, okay? So she's considered this like female warrior, like really intense woman, very powerful, very strong, very big woman. The music, dun, 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 the Ride of the Valkyries, happens in Act 3 of Die Walku, and it depicts when Brunhilde has assembled her troupe. She leads the Valkyries, the other female warriors, into battle, and that's what's going on in this music, is that she's leading them into battle. Two other things to know about this opera. One is that it uses a technique that Wagner developed called a leitmotif. It's something we're going to talk about a little bit later in this semester, but know that leitmotif, it's spelled L-E-I-T-M-O-T-I-F. Leitmotif is when music is associated with a particular character or idea or thing. And in this case, this dun 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 is a symbol for the Valkyries. And in the opera, in all the four operas in this ring cycle, if you ever hear that music, that's the Valkyrie music. Okay, so that's something that Wagner developed, this idea of associating music with a particular character or idea, and this is what's going on in Die Walku. And a modern day example of leitmotif is whenever you hear da-dum, da-dum, you think shark, right? You think Jaws. Just by that little music. That music is actually a leitmotif for the shark. So we'll talk about that a little bit later, but just know that Wagner developed this idea of leitmotif. The last thing you need to know is a fun fact. We've all heard the expression, it ain't over till the fat lady sings, right? That comes from Wagner's ring cycle. In the last opera, in the set of 4 operas, Brunhilde dies. Sorry to be a spoiler alert, but Brunhilde dies, and she takes a long time to die. She takes like 20 minutes to sing a final song, and then the entire cycle is over. That's the last of the 4 operas. Well, back in the 70s, there was sportscasters who were calling a game. I don't even remember what sport it was now, or you know what the score was. But anyways, near the end of the game, and one of the sportscasters is saying, "Oh, I think this one team is going to win," and then the other sportscaster says, "It ain't over till the fat lady sings." And since then, that's really entered popular culture. He was referencing the ring cycle and how after all these hours of all these operas, it ain't over till the fat lady sings. In other words, you're going to keep listening, and then when you hear Brunhilde sing for 20 minutes, you know that it's going to end, right? Because that's when the fat lady sings. And like I said, Brunhilde is supposed to be this powerful person. That's not in this opera. Remember, this Die Walku is the second. That's in the 4th opera. But thanks to that sportscaster knowing the ring cycle, we all say it ain't over till the fat lady sings. So take a listen. Hope you enjoy Die Walku.